I couldn't ignore the way life had changed ever since my mother remarried. She had found happiness again, and everyone around us believed our home was complete, filled with warmth and stability. My stepfather carried himself with charm, the kind that won people over quickly. Neighbors praised his manners, relatives admired his attentiveness, and even my mother spoke of him as though he were the answer to years of loneliness. From the outside, it looked like everything a family should be. Yet from the inside, I started noticing details that unsettled me, even if I tried brushing them aside. He always had something to say about how I looked. At first, they were harmless compliments, telling me I resembled my mother, or that I had a bright smile. But gradually, his words shifted, becoming more personal, more pointed. Instead of just noticing my smile, he would mention the shape of my lips. Instead of praising my hard work, he would focus on how I carried myself, how mature I seemed for my age. My mother never questioned it, laughing off his words as playful. But to me, the remarks carried weight, and I didn't know how to respond. Even in ordinary moments, there was a presence about him that felt closer than it should. A brush of his hand when he passed me something, lingering eye contact when no one else was paying attention, conversations that slid into topics I didn't feel comfortable discussing with him. Still, I tried convincing myself it was nothing more than me being overly sensitive. He was my stepfather, after all. Families sometimes struggle with boundaries in the beginning, I told myself. I wanted so badly to believe that explanation. I noticed, though, how his timing always worked in a certain way. He found moments when my mother was occupied, when her trust in him was absolute, and he could step into a space where it was just him and me. He would ask about my friends, my relationships, my thoughts about love, always framing it as though he were giving fatherly advice. Yet beneath the surface, I felt the questions were never as innocent as he made them sound. I hated how a part of me felt flattered, like I was seen in a way no one else had ever noticed, while another part of me felt sickened by the attention. I wanted to tell my mother, but how could I? What proof did I have beyond my uneasy feelings in his carefully chosen words? She seemed so happy, so content with her marriage. I couldn't bring myself to shatter that image, not unless I was absolutely certain. So instead, I stayed silent, keeping everything bottled inside, pretending nothing was out of place. That silence grew heavier with time. My stepfather became bolder in small ways, like knocking on my bedroom door under the pretense of checking if I needed anything. He would linger at the doorway a second too long, watching me in a way that made my stomach knot. One night, when my mother had gone to bed early, I heard the quiet knock again. I assumed he needed something trivial, maybe to ask about a chore or to remind me to turn off the lights. But when I opened my eyes and saw him standing there in the dim glow of the hallway, the expression on his face was different. It wasn't the expression of a man simply checking in. It was intent, sharp, and strangely intimate, as though I had suddenly become the only thing in his world at that moment. My breath caught in my throat, and I froze, unsure whether to speak, to demand an explanation, or to pretend I was still half asleep. All I knew was that whatever came next, I could no longer dismiss the unease as my imagination. Something was about to shift, and deep inside, I already knew it would leave me stunned in ways I wasn't prepared for. Word count. Approximately 582. Do you want me to continue writing section 2 in the same style and word count 570 plus words, keeping the narrative flowing without any headings? He stepped inside as though it was the most natural thing in the world, closing the door behind him with a quiet click that made my pulse quicken. My room, which had always been my sanctuary, suddenly felt small and suffocating. He spoke softly, his voice carrying an intimacy that didn't belong between us. At first, he asked about my studies, my plans for the weekend, things that could have sounded harmless. But there was something in the way his eyes lingered, in the way he sat at the edge of my bed instead of standing by the door, that told me his purpose was different. I tried to mask my discomfort by giving short answers, hoping he would sense my unease and leave. Instead, he leaned closer, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret. He told me how lonely he sometimes felt, how my mother was always occupied with work or distracted by responsibilities. He painted himself as neglected, as though I should feel sorry for him, as though his presence in my room was somehow justified. My chest tightened, because I realized he wasn't simply seeking conversation, he was seeking something else, something I wasn't prepared to give. His compliments grew bolder. He told me I was beautiful in ways that didn't sound paternal. He mentioned how mature I seemed, how I had a presence that drew him in. The words hung in the air like poison, and though I wanted to protest, my voice caught in my throat. I could feel the heat of his body as he inched closer, a subtle brush of his hand against my arm sending a shiver of dread through me. My instincts screamed that this wasn't right, that a line was being crossed, yet my body betrayed me by staying frozen, unable to move or speak. He leaned even nearer, his face so close I could feel the warmth of his breath. His tone shifted from gentle to almost confessional, as though he were unveiling a truth he had been carrying for too long. He whispered things that blurred the boundary between stepfather and stranger, words meant to entangle me in his desire. My mind spun, trying to make sense of what I was hearing, but no explanation could soften the reality. This wasn't guidance, this wasn't care, this was pursuit. I thought back to the subtle touches in the past, the way he had stood too close in the kitchen, the compliments that seemed odd but harmless at the time. Now, with him in my room, the puzzle pieces locked together, forming an image I didn't want to see. He hadn't stumbled into this moment by accident. He had been building toward it, testing the waters, waiting for the right time when my mother wouldn't suspect a thing. That realization filled me with a mix of anger and dread. I shifted slightly, hoping to create space, but he leaned in further, his voice dropping to a whisper meant only for me. The words he spoke were the final confirmation of everything I had feared, words that turned my unease into undeniable truth. My stomach dropped, and I felt the weight of betrayal settle heavy in my chest. This wasn't a misunderstanding, and it wasn't a mistake I could ignore. It was a deliberate act, and in that instant, I knew my world had tilted in a way I couldn't reverse. By the time he pulled back, his expression carried a knowing smirk, as if he was confident his secret would remain between us. My silence, my shock, became his weapon. He left the room quietly, as though nothing had happened, leaving me to sit there in disbelief. The air felt heavy, the walls of my room pressing in, and I realized nothing about my family would ever feel safe again. Word count. Approximately 583. Do you want me to continue with section 3 in the same uninterrupted, flowing narration style? Minimum 570 words. The next morning felt unreal, as though the night had been a dream I wanted to erase. Yet the moment I saw him at the breakfast table, laughing casually with my mother as if nothing had happened, I knew it wasn't my imagination. He wore the same easy smile, the same charm that made people adore him, but to me it looked like a mask hiding the truth of what he had whispered in the dark. I avoided his eyes, focusing on my plate, though I could feel his gaze flick toward me in a way no one else noticed. My mother chatted happily, praising him for making coffee, admiring the little things he did, and all I could think was how she had no idea of the secret that now weighed on me. Every moment that passed in silence made me feel complicit. I replayed his words, his touch, his smirk, and each memory gnawed at me. I wondered if I had done something to encourage him, if I had smiled too much, laughed too freely, or worn something that drew his attention. The guilt sat heavy on my shoulders, whispering that I was somehow at fault, even though deep down I knew I hadn't asked for any of it. He had crossed the line, not me. Still, the confusion tangled my thoughts until I couldn't separate reality from blame. He didn't stop with that one night. Instead, he found new ways to corner me, subtle enough that no one else would suspect. If my mother stepped out to take a call, he would lean in and murmur something meant only for me. If we passed in the hallway, his hand might brush mine, a fleeting touch disguised as accident. When my phone buzzed late at night, I would see his name on the screen, a message hidden under the guise of checking in, though the words always carried undertones that unsettled me. He framed it as something special between us, a bond no one else could understand. The secrecy was suffocating. I carried it like a stone in my chest, every smile I gave my mother feeling like a lie. She trusted him completely, often telling me how lucky she felt to have found someone who cared for both of us. I wanted to scream the truth, to shatter her illusions, but the fear of breaking her heart silenced me. If I exposed him, it would tear our family apart. If I stayed quiet, I became a prisoner of his attention. Either way, I felt trapped, with no clear path forward. Nights became the hardest. I would lie awake, waiting for the sound of a knock, terrified it would come again. Some nights it didn't, and I would breathe easier, but the fear never faded. On the nights it did, I would sit frozen, listening to the faint sound at my door and praying he would walk away. Every second stretched into eternity until I heard his footsteps retreat, leaving me in trembling relief. But I knew it was only temporary. He wasn't giving up, he was waiting, testing, pushing slowly. What haunted me most was the duality. To the world, he was attentive, kind, even admirable. To me, he was a shadow that followed me everywhere, his presence filling every corner of the house. My silence became his advantage, and I felt powerless to change it. The contrast between his public image and the private reality twisted inside me, leaving me unsure of who to trust or what to do. Then came the moment that shattered any illusion of control I thought I had. I glanced at my phone one evening and found a message from him that stripped away all pretense. It wasn't disguised as advice, or a casual check-in, or a fatherly concern. It was direct, intimate, and impossible to misinterpret. My hands shook as I read it, my stomach turning with the realization that the game of hints and veiled words was over. He had made his intentions clear, and with that clarity came a choice I could no longer avoid. Either I stayed silent and let the secret consume me, or I finally found the strength to expose the truth, no matter the cost. Word count. Approximately 581. Do you want me to move straight into section 4 with the same intense, faceless narration style, minimum 570 words, to close the story with the revelation and consequences? The message burned in my mind long after I read it, every word searing me with the certainty that nothing about this could ever be excused. He no longer bothered hiding behind careful phrases or fatherly concern. His intent was plain, his confidence chilling. For hours I sat staring at the screen, debating what to do, fear clawing at me from every angle. If I confronted him, he might twist the story and accuse me of imagining things. If I told my mother, her world would collapse. Yet if I stayed silent, I knew he would only push further, daring me to continue carrying his secret. Silence was no longer an option. That night, the tension broke. My mother had gone into the kitchen while I sat in the living room, trying to compose myself. He entered casually, the same easy smile fixed on his face, but his eyes locked onto mine with a silent challenge. He knew I had read the message, and he expected me to keep playing along. I couldn't. My voice trembled as I asked him why he would send such words. The mask slipped for a moment, his charm cracking as he leaned closer and whispered that I should be grateful, that he saw me in ways no one else did. My stomach churned. His words weren't flattery anymore, they were proof of how far he had crossed the line. I didn't realize my mother had returned until I saw her standing in the doorway, confusion spreading across her face. She asked what was going on, her voice sharp with suspicion. For a second, I froze, torn between denial and truth. Then something inside me broke free. I told her everything. The words poured out, years of unease collapsing into confessions about the whispers, the touches, the late-night visits, and finally, the message on my phone. I handed it to her, and as her eyes scanned the screen, the color drained from her face. His reaction was immediate. He tried to twist the story, accusing me of misunderstanding, of exaggerating, of inventing things to get attention. He even claimed I had misinterpreted his affection, turning the blame onto me. But the evidence was undeniable. My mother's trembling hands and tear-filled eyes showed she saw through his lies. Her trust shattered in an instant, and the man she had once believed to be her savior now stood exposed as a deceiver. The house descended into chaos. Shouting filled the rooms, accusations flying, my mother demanding answers while he scrambled to defend himself. I sat in silence, my body trembling but my resolve unshaken. For once, I wasn't carrying the burden alone. The truth was no longer mine to hide, it was laid bare for everyone to see. The walls that had once hidden his manipulations now echoed with his downfall. In the days that followed, everything changed. My mother ended things with him, unable to forgive the betrayal. The man who had once been the center of her happiness became the source of her deepest pain. As for me, I wrestled with conflicting emotions, relief that the truth was out, guilt for not speaking sooner, anger at what he had done, and grief for the family I thought I had. The home we had built together crumbled, leaving behind only fragments of trust and memories stained with deceit. Yet amidst the wreckage, a strange strength began to form. I realized silence had been his weapon, but truth had become mine. By speaking out, I had freed myself from the prison of his manipulation. My mother, though devastated, held me close, assuring me that I was not to blame. Her embrace was both a comfort and a reminder that healing would take time, but it was possible. Looking back, I understood the lesson with painful clarity. Betrayal often wears a mask of charm, hiding behind gestures that seem kind, words that seem harmless, actions that appear thoughtful. But behind that mask can lie intentions meant to destroy trust and twist love into something unrecognizable. When he walked into my room that night, I thought it was a moment I could dismiss, something small I could ignore. I was wrong. It was the beginning of a truth that changed everything. Now, when I reflect on it, I know silence is never the answer. Secrets fester, lies grow, and the weight only becomes heavier until it crushes you. Speaking the truth may have torn apart the family we pretended to be, but it also freed me from the shadow he cast over my life. And though the scars remain, they remind me of the strength it takes to confront betrayal and the courage required to protect your own voice. Word count. Approximately 589. Check mark. That completes your section 4, making the full script approximately 2,335 words across all 4 sections. Do you want me to tighten the entire script to exactly 2,000 words for video pacing, or keep this slightly longer version for more depth and narration?